Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty cool story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. So get cozy, enjoy it, and watch it till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, where humanity clings to existence across a million worlds, there exist warriors whose beauty masks an ancient curse. They are the Blood Angels, the Ninth Legion, the sons of Sanguinius. Their story is one of nobility and horror, of angels who walk among the stars, yet carry within them a thirst that can never be quenched. This is their complete history, from the blood-soaked origins in old Earth's radiation zones to the present age of darkness, where they stand as one of the Imperium's most revered and most cursed chapters. The Revenant Legion, origins in darkness. Long before they wore armor of crimson and gold, before they were known as the Blood Angels, they were simply the Ninth Legion. But unlike their brother legions who fought in the grand campaigns that unified terror under the Emperor's banner, the Ninth operated in shadow and silence. While other proto-legions earned glory on the battlefields of Albia, Indonesia, and France, the Ninth Legion was absent from history's spotlight, granted a role as vital as it was unsightly. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom and terrible calculation, had designed each of his Space Marine legions for specific purposes. The gene seed that would create these warriors was engineered to fulfill different roles in the great conquest that would unite humanity. For the Ninth Legion, that role was to venture into places where even the Thunder Warriors hesitated to tread. They were deployed to the most dangerous war zones of terror, to those accursed regions ravaged by the radphages and chemical strains of old night, places where only the most twisted and debased breeds of mankind still lived. In the wastelands that existed outside of history's record, they held the line alone and unnoticed. These were not the gilded palaces of rogue kings, or the fortified strongholds of techno-barbarian warlords. No, the Ninth Legion fought in sunken fortresses deep beneath Terra's poisoned surface, in radiation-soaked valleys, where the air itself could strip flesh from bone, in ruined hive cities, where generations of mutation had transformed the human inhabitants into something barely recognizable, where other legions took only the best recruits, princes and champions among the conquered techno-barbarian nations of old Earth, producing but few initiates. The Ninth Legion cast their net wider and deeper. They took in the hordes of dispossessed and broken, the mutated and the scarred, those who had survived for years in the rad zones and toxic wilderness. These were beings more monstrous than human, twisted by countless generations mired in terror's poisoned wilds. Yet from these lowly origins emerged a breed of space marines who were uniformly tall and fair, their features sculpted with stern elegance. The genetic template of the Ninth Legion's unknown Primarch seemed to favor the twisted and warped, but in doing so, it inflicted immense pain upon those inducted into the Legion. The transformation that turned these radiation-scarred survivors into Space Marines was agonizing beyond measure. Many died in the process. Only those who had endured the horrific rad zones and poisons for years could survive the ordeal to become a warrior of the Ninth Legion. This resulted in a limited number of successful recruits compared to other legions. But what they lacked in easy recruitment, they made up for in numbers. The Ninth Legion claimed entire tribes of wastelanders, prisoners of war, and long trains of hopefuls seeking the miracle of transformation. They were among the largest of the proto-legions, their sudden arrival on a battlefield, akin to a tsunami, brutally sweeping away opposition and leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. They specialized in small-scale warfare, precision strikes, and audacious raids, focusing on murderous close combat. When they struck with overwhelming force and savage efficiency. But there was something else about the Ninth Legion, something that earned them whispers and dark rumors among the ranks of the Emperor's mortal armies. In the wake of each battle, when the fighting had ceased and the dead lay scattered across corpse-choked fields, the warriors of the Ninth Legion would remain. They haunted the battlefield long after other forces had moved on, seeking out the finest among the fallen and consuming their flesh and blood. The Eaters of the Dead, they were called. To outsiders, it was a grim and macabre sight, watching blood-smeared angels stalking the fallen and wounded enemy champions, kneeling over corpses with knives drawn. Yet this was part of the Emperor's grand design. Through their genetic augmentations, specifically the Homophagia implant, the Ninth Legion could absorb their enemies' knowledge and skill by consuming their flesh. They could literally steal their foes' power, gaining tactical intelligence, combat techniques, and strategic understanding through this cannibalistic practice. This gift came at a cost. The more they fed, the more they seemed to need to feed. There was a hunger growing within them, something dark that lurked beneath the surface of their superhuman discipline. The bloody-handed apothecaries of the Legion worked without rest to keep their brothers at fighting strength, even as rumors spread about the true nature of the Ninth's appetites. One incident during the Unification Wars stands out in the sparse records that mention the Legion. During the Second Siege of Yarant, the Ninth Legion's 14th Company was formally sanctioned by Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists for their actions. The warriors had taken to killing and consuming prisoners on the walls of the fortress, not merely for intelligence, but to demoralize the enemy. The psychological warfare was effective, but it drew unwanted scrutiny. Even more damning were reports filed by the Imperial Army after a retreat from Shadim. Mortal soldiers of the Malagant Rifles Regiment, mortally wounded and left behind during the withdrawal, had been slaughtered and drained of their blood by warriors of the Ninth Legion. Whether this was an act of mercy to prevent them from falling into enemy hands, or something darker, was never clearly established. But it added weight to those who claimed the Ninth Legion should share the fate of the two failed legions that had already been expunged from Imperial records. The Ninth Legion earned another name during these early years: the Revenant Legion. This epithet came from their peculiar practice of taking on the identities of senior officers who were slain in battle. Using their mutated Homophagia implant to ingest the flesh of fallen commanders, they would gain those officers' memories and skills, then assume their roles. To outsiders, it seemed that many warriors of the Revenant Legion kept returning from certain death, rising again and again like specters, refusing to accept their fate. But the greatest mystery of the Ninth Legion came during the closing stages of the Unification Wars. 12,000 warriors of the Ninth Legion, all seasoned veterans of what would later be called the Terror Wars, vanished on the moons of Neptune. As the Emperor and his grand armies subdued Saturn, Mars, and the inner worlds, no word came from the Ninth Legion. Their fate remained unknown, a mystery that would not be solved until much later. The Ninth Legion stood at a crossroads. They were effective, undeniably so, but they were also disturbing. They had power, but that power came with a darkness that made even other space marines uneasy. They needed something to transform them, to lift them from the shadows where they had been forged. They needed their Primarch. Sanguinius, the Angel Primarch. When the Primarchs were still gestating in their artificial wombs beneath the Imperial Palace, when the Emperor's greatest creations were but infants containing the genetic potential to lead humanity to the stars, the ruinous powers of chaos struck. Unable to destroy these mighty beings, due to the powerful arcane protections laid upon them by the Emperor, the Dark Gods did the next best thing. They scattered the infant Primarchs across the galaxy through the warp, casting them to distant worlds where they might be corrupted, twisted, or destroyed by circumstance and environment. The gestation pod that housed the infant who would become Sanguinius came to rest upon the surface of a moon called Baal Secundus. In ancient days, Baal and its moons had possessed terror-like atmospheres. Baal itself was a world of red rust deserts, but its moons, Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, were close to paradises. But those days were long past. As the dark age of technology ended in the age of strife, civil war had erupted between Baal and its colonized moons, leading to nuclear devastation of the entire planetary system. Baal Secundus, once a paradise, had become a radiation-soaked hellscape. The air itself was poisonous to most forms of life. The few humans who survived on its surface were stunted, mutated, constantly at war with each other for the moon's meager resources. Radiation storms swept across the landscape with terrifying regularity. Massive predators, twisted by centuries of mutation, stalked the wastes. It was a world that should have killed the infant Primarch within hours of his arrival. But Primarchs are not like other beings. Even as an infant, Sanguinius displayed abilities that defied mortal understanding. The gestation pod crashed at a location now known as Angel's Fall, and there he was discovered by one of the wandering tribes of humans who called themselves the Folk of Pure Blood, or simply the Blood. These were humans who had somehow remained relatively untouched by the rampant mutations that plagued most of Baal Secundus's population, and they were fiercely proud of their genetic purity. When they opened the gestation pod and found the infant within, they almost killed him then and there. For the touch of chaos, or perhaps the Emperor's own design, had given the child something that marked him as different from normal humanity. Tiny vestigial wings, like those of an angel, emerged from his back. Many in the tribe wanted to kill the child as a mutant, an abomination. Others wanted to spare him, for in all other ways he appeared as perfect a child as had ever been seen, with features of unsurpassed beauty and an aura that seemed to inspire awe in all who looked upon him. The tribe chose mercy, and in doing so, changed the fate of the galaxy. As Sanguinius grew, his wings also grew, changing from tiny vestigial things into mighty pinions that could bear him aloft upon the desert air. His development was rapid, as with all Primarchs. At 3 weeks old, he was a large child capable of walking. Within a year, he looked and acted like a man in his youthful prime. His abilities were astounding. He could walk without a radiation suit in the most poisonous of Baal Secundus's deserts. He could shatter massive boulders with a single blow of his outstretched hand. In the use of all weapons, he soon excelled his teachers. Before even being formally found by the tribe, Sanguinius had slain a Balite fire scorpion, one of the most fearsome predators on the moon. This creature, a massive arachnid mutated to monstrous proportions by radiation, was death to entire tribes. Sanguinius killed it alone, as an infant, with nothing but his bare hands and his indomitable will. The first time the members of the Blood saw him truly angry was when a wandering band of mutants surprised the tribe. These mutants, twisted mockeries of humanity, numbered over 100. Sanguinius slew them all. When the blood rage overtook him, when he felt his adopted people's lives were in danger, the Primarch's powers awoke to their fullness. A nimbus of light played about his head as he moved with impossible speed, each strike of his hands ending a life, each beat of his wings carrying him to the next foe. It was beautiful and terrible to behold. As he matured, Sanguinius used both his tactical genius and his precognitive abilities to help the purebloods win their endless war against the mutants of Baal Secundus. Like his brother Conrad Curzay, Sanguinius possessed the gift of foresight. He would receive visions of the future, glimpses of events yet to come. But unlike Curzay, who was driven mad by his visions of humanity's darkness, Sanguinius used his gift constructively. He could see where enemies would strike, anticipate their movements, lead his people to victory through battles that should have been impossible to win. Under his leadership, the pure bloods began to dominate Baal Secundus. The mutant tribes fell before them one by one. Sanguinius united not just one tribe, but many, bringing order to a world that had known only chaos and violence for generations. And as his legend grew, something inevitable happened. The people of Baal Secundus began to worship him as a god. Sanguinius never encouraged this worship. How could he? He was a being of such physical perfection that even without trying, his presence inspired awe and devotion. A 10-foot-tall figure with white wings that could span 30 feet when fully extended, features of impossible beauty, and an aura of nobility that seemed to radiate from his very soul. The stunted, heavily mutated inhabitants of Baal Secundus looked upon him and saw divinity made flesh. They called him the Pure One, the Bright Angel, the Lord of Baal. The Emperor, questing across the galaxy in search of his lost sons, felt the psychic beacon of Sanguinius's presence and came to Baal. The master of mankind did not announce himself openly. Instead, he disguised his appearance and infiltrated a gathering where Sanguinius was giving an address to his followers. There, the Emperor witnessed his lost son deliver an impassioned speech that displayed both humility and courage, nobility and wisdom. But Sanguinius, blessed with foresight, had already known the Emperor was coming. When the speech ended, when the crowds dispersed, Sanguinius turned to face the disguised stranger who was his father. Unlike some of his brothers who fought against the Emperor upon their first meeting, Sanguinius immediately recognized the master of mankind for who he was. Sanguinius fell to his knees and pledged his allegiance to his father. But before accepting that pledge, he made demands. He asked that the Emperor swear an oath to leave the pure bloods of Baal in peace, to allow them to continue their lives without interference. He asked what would happen if he refused the Emperor's offer. He was the only Primarch to question whether he even wanted to join the Great Crusade. The Emperor, who could see the noble soul within his son, agreed to Sanguinius's terms. He promised that the people of Baal would be left in peace, that the imperial truth would not be forced upon them, that they could continue their way of life. Satisfied, knowing that his father understood his love for his adopted people, Sanguinius pledged himself to the Emperor's service. The Emperor inducted the best warriors of Sanguinius's tribe into the existing 9th Legion. These men, the champions of Baal Secundus, brought with them a culture of nobility, artistry, and honor that would begin to transform the Legion. The brutal killers who had earned the epithet Eaters of the Dead would now be tempered by the influence of Sanguinius's Baalite warriors, men who believed in dignity, in beauty, even in the midst of war's horror. Sanguinius's first battle after being found by the Emperor was the pacification of Tegar Pentarus. It was a storm-racked world, the 5th planet in the Tegar system, and Sanguinius led from the front. His first confirmed kill as a warrior of the Imperium was a ferocious Carnodon, a massive predatory beast whose pelt was later fashioned into a ceremonial war cloak for the Primarch. But the battle itself was significant for another reason. It was where Sanguinius fought alongside his legion for the first time, standing in the front lines to prove his devotion to warriors who had known only scorn and mistrust from the rest of the Imperium. The warriors of the 9th Legion, scarred veterans who had fought in the shadows for so long, looked upon their Primarch and wept. Here was a being who could have demanded anything, who could have shown disgust at their bloody practices and dark reputation. Instead, Sanguinius took a knee before them. Amidst the rain and storms of that far world, surrounded by rough-cast killers and blood drinkers, the winged Primarch offered them not demands, but his own loyalty, freely given and without reservation. These were warriors who had offered up everything to the new Imperium, and in return been granted only scorn and mistrust. Now they were offered a Primarch's loyalty, and with it came the promise of transformation. Sanguinius would not simply lead them, he would remake them in his image, turning a legion of brutal efficiency into something noble and worthy of pride. The transformation was not instantaneous, but it was profound. Sanguinius carefully molded the legion, introducing more warriors from Baal, champions who carried his cultural values. Where once there had been a barely contained horde of ultra-violent killers in grey blood-spattered ceramite, there now stood a gleaming host of beautiful, noble warriors, resplendent in red and gold. The Revenant Legion was gone, and in its place stood the Blood Angels. The Great Crusade, angels of vengeance and beauty. The Blood Angels emerged from their transformation as one of the most respected legions in the Great Crusade. Sanguinius had achieved what few thought possible. He had taken a legion known for darkness and savagery and turned them into exemplars of nobility and honor. Their armor, once grey and stained with the blood of countless battles, now gleamed crimson and gold. Their banners bore angels ascending toward the stars. Their very presence on a battlefield inspired hope in imperial forces and terror in the enemies of mankind. But beneath the beautiful exterior, the old darkness remained. The hunger that had driven the Ninth Legion to consume the flesh of their enemies had not disappeared. If anything, it had grown stronger. Sanguinius knew about this flaw in his son's gene seed, this red thirst that drove them to acts of savagery. He worked tirelessly to keep it hidden, to ensure that only a few trusted individuals knew the full extent of the problem. One of those individuals was Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the first Primarch found and the Emperor's favorite son. Sanguinius and Horus became close friends during the Great Crusade, perhaps closer than any other pair of Primarchs. They campaigned together, fought side by side, shared confidences that they kept from others. When Horus discovered the genetic flaw of the Blood Angels during a joint campaign, he kept the secret from the Emperor, protecting his brother from potential sanction or dissolution of the Legion. This friendship would later prove to be one of the great tragedies of the Horus heresy, a betrayal that would echo through 10,000 years and scar the Blood Angels forever. But during the Great Crusade, the bond between Horus and Sanguinius seemed unbreakable, a brotherhood forged in the fires of conquest and tempered by mutual respect and affection. Sanguinius's relationship with his other brothers varied. He became close with Rabut Guilliman, the Lord of Ultramar, whose strategic genius complemented Sanguinius's tactical brilliance. Jaghatai Khan, the great Khan of the White Scars, appreciated Sanguinius's speed and aerial combat tactics, seeing a kindred spirit who understood the value of swift, devastating strikes. Rogel Dawn, the Praetorian of Terror, respected Sanguinius's unwavering loyalty and his defensive mastery when situations demanded it. Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns, found in Sanguinius another soul touched by psychic power and burdened with gifts that set him apart. The two would often discuss the nature of their abilities, the weight of foresight, the responsibility that came with seeing futures that others could not perceive. Even Conrad Kersey, the Night Haunter, had a strange relationship with Sanguinius. Both possessed visions of the future, but where Kersey saw only darkness and inevitability, Sanguinius maintained hope and worked to change fate. Their philosophical differences would come to a head later, but even Kersey seemed to recognize something kindred in the angel, even if he despised what he saw as Sanguinius's refusal to accept the truth of their cursed natures. During the Great Crusade, the Blood Angels fought on hundreds of worlds, bringing imperial compliance through both diplomacy and warfare. Their campaigns took them to the furthest reaches of human-settled space. From the glittering core worlds near Terra to the wild frontier systems on the galaxy's edge. They fought in void battles above dying suns, in ground wars across irradiated wastelands, in boarding actions through space hulks that had drifted through the warp for millennia. Sanguinius was unique among the Primarchs, in that he genuinely tried to avoid bloodshed when possible. Where other Primarchs saw conquest as the only viable option, Sanguinius saw potential for diplomacy, for negotiation, for finding common ground between the Imperium and the human civilizations that had survived Old Night in isolation. He would offer terms, negotiate with planetary rulers, seek peaceful integration into the Imperium whenever circumstances allowed. His charisma and noble bearing made him an effective diplomat, able to convince hardened warlords and suspicious planetary governors that joining the Imperium was in their best interests. There are records of dozens of worlds that joined the Imperium without a single shot fired, swayed by Sanguinius's words and the promise of protection under the Emperor's rule. These bloodless victories were celebrated by the Blood Angels as much as their martial triumphs, proof that they were more than just warriors, that they could bring worlds into the fold through wisdom and persuasion, rather than only through violence. But when war became inevitable, when negotiations failed, or when enemies refused all terms, the Blood Angels prosecuted warfare with terrible efficiency.
I want to pause here because this moment, Cygnus Prime, this is where everything changes for the Blood Angels. Before this, the Red Thirst was their secret shame, something they could mostly control. After K-Banda, after seeing their Prime Mark broken, they understand that this curse isn't going away, it's part of them forever. And yet, they don't give up. They don't surrender to despair. That resilience, that refusal to quit, is why I keep coming back to the Blood Angels story. Anyways, let's get back to it.
Their preferred method of combat combined swift aerial assault with devastating melee attacks. Jump pack-equipped assault squads would descend from the skies like vengeful angels, crashing into enemy formations with bolt pistol and chainsword. The sight of hundreds of Blood Angels dropping from the clouds, their red armor gleaming in the sun, their battle cries echoing across the battlefield, was often enough to break enemy morale before the first blow was struck. One campaign that exemplifies both the glory and the shame of the Blood Angels during this era was the compliance of Anactor. This was a human civilization that had survived Old Night through strength of arms and technological prowess. They refused all attempts at communication with the Imperial fleet, seeing the Imperium as just another would-be conqueror. The Blood Angels were forced to fight for every meter of space, every orbital platform, every fortified position on the surface of their throne world. The Anactorans fought with a valor that earned even Sanguinius's admiration. These were human warriors who refused to break, who stood their ground against superhuman space marines and died to the last defender. When the campaign finally ended, with the destruction of Anactor's leadership and military capacity, Sanguinius himself gave the order for a 6-hour ceasefire in honor of the foe's sacrifice. The Blood Angels arrayed their ships in space, just short of the system's throne world, hoping that this gesture would convince the Anactoran leadership to finally bend knee to the Emperor and join the Imperium rather than face total annihilation. Sanguinius privately lamented the need for their destruction and genuinely hoped that the pause would allow for peaceful resolution. What came next shattered any such hope and kindled the wrath of the great angel in its full and terrible glory. Several Anactoran craft approached the Blood Angels' flagship, the Red Tier, under a flag of truce. They signaled that they bore gifts for the Primarch. All scans revealed no targeting or aberrant energy readings, but the moment the first barge came close enough to the Red Tier, it erupted in a massive explosion. These were not gifts, but bombs, suicide craft meant to destroy Sanguinius and his fleet through treachery. The fury of Sanguinius was a fearsome thing to behold. The winged Primarch led his legion in a final assault that saw Anactor's throne world reduced to ruins. No quarter was given. The Blood Angels' advance was relentless, their vengeance absolute. This was the darker side of Sanguinius, the rage that lurked beneath his noble exterior, the fury of an angel who had been forced to witness betrayal of the worst kind. But it was not just the Blood Angels who fought with unusual ferocity that day. As the battle raged and blood flowed in rivers through Anactor's streets, some of the Blood Angels began to exhibit behavior that disturbed even their battle brothers. They moved beyond tactical necessity into something approaching frenzy. They tore at enemies with their bare hands when their weapons ran dry. They drank the blood of the fallen, lost in a state that was not quite madness, but was certainly not the disciplined fury of a space marine in battle. Sanguinius saw this and recognized it for what it was, the red thirst, manifesting in his sons more strongly than ever before. The betrayal, the deaths of Blood Angels in the suicide bombing, the fury of the final assault, all of it had fed the darkness within them. After Anarctor's fall, Sanguinius gathered his officers and confided his concerns. The flaw in their gene seed was not being suppressed, it was growing stronger. This pattern would repeat across the Great Crusade. The Blood Angels would fight with honor and nobility, exemplifying the best of what the Emperor's Space Marines could be. But in moments of extreme stress, when brother Marines fell or when betrayal struck, the Red Thirst would surge forward, and the beautiful angels would become something else entirely. Savage, bloodthirsty, almost feral in their violence. Sanguinius walked a careful line, managing his legion's reputation while privately working with his apothecaries and chaplains to understand and control the flaw. He instituted rituals and practices meant to give the Blood Angels outlets for their darker urges. The sanguinary priesthood was established, warrior mystics who carried vials of what was purported to be Sanguinius's own blood, using it in ceremonies meant to strengthen the bond between the Primarch and his sons, while also helping to keep the Red Thirst in check. The Blood Angels became renowned for their artistic pursuits. When not in battle, they were sculptors, painters, poets, craftsmen of the highest order. This was partly Sanguinius's influence, his own love of beauty and culture spreading to his sons, but it was also practical. The creative outlet gave the Blood Angels a way to channel their intense emotions, to find calm in creation rather than destruction. A Blood Angel who spent his hours between battles sculpting statues or composing music was less likely to succumb to the Red Thirst's call. Despite these efforts, or perhaps because the flaw was growing beyond any ability to suppress it, incidents continued to occur. There were battles where Blood Angels had to be forcibly restrained by their own brothers. There were campaigns where entire companies disappeared into the fury of the Red Thirst and had to be recovered and reconditioned. And always, Sanguinius bore the weight of this knowledge, knowing that the legion he loved, the sons he had remade in his image, carried within them a curse that might one day destroy them all. The relationship between the Blood Angels and their Primarch was unlike that of any other legion. Other Primarchs were revered, feared, obeyed without question, but the Blood Angels loved Sanguinius with an intensity that bordered on worship. They would have died for any of their Primarch brothers out of duty and honor, but for Sanguinius, they would have died gladly, joyfully, considering it the highest privilege to give their lives in his service. This devotion would be tested in ways none of them could imagine when the Great Crusade came to its end and the Horus heresy began. The flaw revealed, Cygnus Prime and the trap. The Horus heresy did not begin with open warfare. It began with subtle manipulations, careful positioning of forces, and the dispatch of loyal legions to distant corners of the galaxy where they could not interfere with the War Master's plans. Horus, corrupted by the Chaos Gods and preparing to make his move against the Emperor, needed to ensure that the most dangerous loyalist legions would be unable to reach Terra when his betrayal became known. The Blood Angels were one such legion. Their loyalty to the Emperor was absolute, their combat effectiveness was legendary, and their Primarch was beloved by all. Horus knew that if Sanguinius and his sons stood against him, they could turn the tide of any battle. They had to be eliminated, or better yet, corrupted to serve the forces of chaos. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Horus, still acting in his role as War Master, sent a messenger to the Blood Angels with urgent orders. The Cygnus Cluster, a trinary star system of 7 worlds and 15 moons near the galactic core, had gone dark. All communications had ceased. Intelligence suggested that the system had been overrun by a Xenos species called the Nephilim, hostile aliens that the Blood Angels had previously encountered and defeated during the Great Crusade. Sanguinius had no reason to suspect betrayal. This was Horus, his closest friend among his brothers, his confidant and ally. The orders were legitimate, the threat seemed real, and the mission was well within the Blood Angels' capabilities. The Legion mobilized, assembled its fleet, and set course for the Cygnus Cluster with the intent to liberate human populations from Xenos overlords. they walked blindly into the deadliest trap ever sprung on a space marine legion. For the Cygnus cluster had not been overrun by Xenos, it had been claimed by demons. Kyrus the Perverse, a keeper of secrets and greater demon of Slanesh, ruled the system with absolute authority. The worlds of Cygnus had been transformed into an extension of the realm of chaos, reality itself twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. When the Blood Angels' fleet emerged from the warp at the edge of the Cygnus system, they were immediately assaulted by psychic energies of terrible potency. Navigators screamed as their third eyes burned out from the surge of warp energy. Astropaths died by the dozens, their minds shattered by the demonic presence saturating the system. Even the Legion's ship serfs and auxiliaries, normal humans with no psychic talent, felt the oppressive weight of chaos pressing down upon them. Panic spread through the fleet like wildfire. Crew members went mad, seeing horrors that weren't there, or worse, horrors that were very much present in the Imperium bleeding through into reality. Suicides began occurring across multiple ships. Some walked into airlocks and opened them to the void. Others used knives and las guns on themselves or their fellow crew. The psychic screaming went on, and none would be unmarked by it. Sanguinius took control of the situation through sheer force of will. His own psychic presence, pure and untainted, pushed back against the demonic corruption. He rallied his sons, gave orders, restored discipline through both command authority and his innate ability to inspire courage in even the most dire circumstances. The Blood Angels' fleet reorganized, formed defensive patterns, and prepared to confront whatever waited for them in the Cygnus system. Admiral Athene Ducade, commander of the Imperial Navy elements attached to the Blood Angels' fleet, was among those who succumbed to the psychic assault. Her mind shattered by visions of hell, she turned the Blood Angels' flagship, the Red Tier, towards Cygnus Prime and engaged its engines at full power. Sanguinius, realizing what was happening, raced to the bridge and wrestled control of the massive ship away from the possessed admiral. But by then, it was too late to prevent impact entirely. The Red Tier plunged through Cygnus Prime's atmosphere like a meteor, its hull screaming from the stresses of uncontrolled entry. Sanguinius used every bit of his strength and skill to steer the flagship into a rough emergency landing rather than a catastrophic crash. The ship hit the surface of Cygnus Prime with the force of an orbital bombardment, carving a miles-long scar across the landscape before finally coming to rest. As the Blood Angels recovered from the impact and assessed their situation, they looked upon the world of Cygnus Prime and saw hell made manifest. Cities that had once housed millions of humans were now bone pits and charnel grounds. Oceans had boiled away, leaving salt flats stained red with blood. The very sky itself was wrong, filled with colors that shouldn't exist and shapes that hurt to perceive. Demons walked openly across the landscape, legions of warp-spawned horrors numbering in the millions. And above it all, rising like a blasphemous monument to the dark gods, stood the Cathedral of the Mark. This was the palace that Kyrus the Perverse had erected as its headquarters, a structure built entirely from the bones of the murdered, every skull and femur a piece of the murdered innocents who had once populated Cygnus Prime. The cathedral seemed to pulse with its own life, seeming to breathe with the rhythms of the warp, radiating corruption like a physical force. Sanguinius swore an oath. He would personally confront and vanquish Kyrus, would cast down this abomination and cleanse Cygnus Prime, even if it cost him everything. He led his elite companies in a direct assault on the Cathedral of the Mark, marching across plains choked with demon hordes, cutting through walls of twisted flesh and rivers of boiling blood. But before he could reach Kyrus, before he could even set foot in the cathedral, Sanguinius was confronted by a figure that would haunt the Blood Angels for 10,000 years. A massive demon, the color of dried blood, rose to meet him in the skies above Cygnus Prime. It stood as tall as a titan, with the head of a beast and wings like those of a bat. It carried a whip of living flame and an axe the size of a tank. Its name was Kabanda, and it was one of the mightiest bloodthirsters in Khorne's service. The demon spoke, its voice carrying across the battlefield, even over the sounds of war. "Why do you fight us, so-called angel? You may be able to best me, but you cannot hope to defeat chaos. My Lord Khorne is powerful beyond means you can measure. Your emperor is weak and foolish. Even now he hides from us. Is he afraid to fight?" Sanguinius, fury rising in his heart at the daemon's blasphemy, commanded Ka'Bandha to stand aside or be destroyed. The demon laughed, a sound like the grinding of bones. "I have no master save Khorne. You do not realize the threat that demons and chaos hold for humanity. Your ally Horus has led you here, into a trap, while he moves to lay siege against terror." The revelation struck Sanguinius like a physical blow. Horus, his closest brother, his friend, a traitor, leading rebellion against the emperor. It seemed impossible, unthinkable, but Ka'Bandha had no reason to lie, and the presence of demons in such numbers suggested coordination beyond what the creatures could achieve on their own. Somewhere in the depths of his precognitive gift, Sanguinius had always known this day might come, but knowing and accepting were two very different things. Ka'Bandha, seeing Sanguinius's hesitation, pressed his advantage. "Join the forces of Khorne, and this war ends now. You and your sons are warriors beyond compare. In Khorne's service, you would be elevated beyond anything the false emperor could offer. Give in to your rage, embrace the bloodlust that already flows through your veins, and become something glorious." Sanguinius's response was to attack. The angel and the demon clashed in midair, exchanging blows that would have shattered buildings. Sanguinius's blade, the legendary spear of Telesto, met Ka'Bandha's axe with a sound like thunder. They circled each other in the blood-red sky, two winged figures locked in mortal combat while their respective forces battled below. The duel was brutal and devastating. Sanguinius managed to drive his spear into Ka'Bandha's chest, piercing the demon's hide and drawing Icarus blood that steamed in the poisoned air. But Ka'Bandha, even wounded, proved the more powerful. The demon's whip lashed out, wrapping around Sanguinius's legs. With a savage yank, Ka'Bandha shattered both of Sanguinius's legs, the bones splintering with cracks that could be heard across the battlefield. The Primarch fell from the sky like a broken bird, his magnificent wings unable to support his weight with his legs destroyed. He crashed to the surface of Cygnus Prime with an impact that left a crater, his body broken, but his spirit still burning with defiance. Ka'Bandha stood over him, preparing to deliver the killing blow, to claim the skull of a Primarch for the Blood God's throne. But the Blood Angels, seeing their beloved father struck down, did something that they had been fighting against their entire existence. They gave in to the red thirst completely. Every single Blood Angel on Cygnus Prime, from the newest inductee to the most veteran company captain, felt a surge of rage so intense it transcended anything they had experienced before. The careful discipline that Sanguinius had instilled in them, the artistic temperament that had balanced their warrior nature, all of it burned away in an instant. They became berserkers, savage beyond anything the demons had expected. Blood Angels tore through demonic hordes with their bare hands when their weapons broke. They bit and clawed and ripped with a ferocity that made even Khorne's demons hesitate. They fought without regard for tactics, for preservation, for anything except the need to kill, to rend, to destroy everything that had hurt their father. The red thirst claimed them all, even those who had thought themselves above its influence. Sergeant Nasir Amit, leading the assault on the Cathedral of the Mark, led his brothers in a massacre that extended beyond the demons to the word-bearers' traitor marines who were coordinating the attack, and even to the space wolves who had been attached to the Blood Angels' fleet. In their rage, the Blood Angels could not distinguish friend from foe. They only knew that Sanguinius had fallen and that blood needed to be spilled in vengeance. Some Blood Angels retained enough sanity to recognize what was happening. A group of former librarians, led by Makani Kano, had been forbidden from using their psychic powers by the Emperor's decree at the Council of Nicaea. But desperate times called for desperate measures. They reached into the warp, risking demonic corruption, and used their combined psychic might to revive Sanguinius from his injured state. The Primarch awoke to find his sons consumed by the very thing he had fought so hard to suppress. His legs were healing, Primarch physiology regenerating what would have been crippling wounds for any other being. But the sight of his sons in the grip of the red thirst wounded him in ways that broken bones never could. This was his failure, his curse, passed down to every warrior who bore his gene seed. Despite the agony in his body and soul, Sanguinius forced himself to stand. He took to the sky once more, his healing legs barely able to support his weight, his wings beating with desperate strength. Ka'Bandha was still there, still gloating about his victory, still convinced that the Blood Angels would fall completely to chaos. The rematch was swift and decisive. Sanguinius, channeling all of his grief, his rage, his love for his sons into a single focused assault, seized Ka'Bandha by the ankle and arm. He lifted the massive demon high above his head, demonstrating strength that should have been impossible in his injured state. Then, with a savage motion, Sanguinius broke the bloodthirster's back over his knee. The crack echoed across Cygnus Prime like a thunderclap. Ka'Bandha screamed, not in pain, but in fury and disbelief. No mortal had ever bested him in such fashion. Sanguinius hurled the broken demon's body at the hordes of lesser demons below, sending it tumbling through the air to crash among Khorne's warriors. With their general defeated, with their greatest champion cast down, the demonic forces began to falter. Ka'Bandha's spirit was banished back to the warp, where it would take the demon 1,000 years to reform its body. But the memory of this defeat, the humiliation of being broken by a mere Primarch, would burn in the bloodthirster's essence forever. Ka'Bandha would nurse its hatred for 10,000 years, waiting for another chance to face Sanguinius or his sons, to finally achieve the vengeance that had been denied on Cygnus Prime. With Ka'Bandha defeated, Sanguinius led his sons into the Cathedral of the Mark. The Blood Angels had regained enough control to follow their Primarch, though all of them were scarred by what they had experienced. Inside the cathedral, they found Kairos the Perverse waiting in a throne room constructed from the bones of innocents, surrounded by word-bearers, traitor marines, and cultists who had once been human. Kairos offered Sanguinius a terrible choice. The demon could see the flaw in the Blood Angel's gene seed, could sense the red thirst that had consumed them during the battle. It offered to remove this curse, to lift the taint from Sanguinius's bloodline forever. All it would require was that Sanguinius sacrifice himself to something called the Rage Fire, a psychic construct that would burn away the imperfection in his genetic template. The catch, of course, was that the Rage Fire would also burn away Sanguinius's soul, damning him to an eternity of torment in the warp and likely corrupting his entire legion to serve chaos. But Kairos presented it as a genuine choice. Accept damnation and save his sons from the red thirst, or refuse and watch the Blood Angels slowly tear themselves apart across the millennia. Sanguinius, seeing no other option to save his legion, was about to step into the Rage Fire. He had made his decision, prepared to sacrifice everything for his sons. But before he could take that final step, Apothecary Meros, one of the Blood Angels, who had stood by Sanguinius since the first days after their reunion on Baal, threw himself into the Rage Fire instead. Meros was consumed by the warp flames, his body and soul transformed into something called the Red Angel, a being of pure rage and power, but stripped of everything that had made him human. Sanguinius, watching one of his most loyal sons sacrifice himself, swore vengeance on Horus and all who served the traitor. He turned his fury on Kairos the Perverse and slew the greater demon in single combat, destroying its physical form and sending it howling back to the warp. The Cygnus campaign ended with the Blood Angels victorious but devastated. Over 10,000 Blood Angels had died in the fighting. Every surviving warrior bore psychic scars from exposure to such concentrated chaos corruption. The Red Thirst had been revealed in its full horror, not just to Sanguinius, but to every blood angel who had felt it consume them during the battle. They now knew what lurked within their gene seed, the darkness that waited to swallow them if they ever let their guard down. Sanguinius ordered that the Cygnus cluster be declared morte perpetua, forever dead, and quarantined from the rest of the Imperium. Warning beacons were stationed at all warp jump points to warn the unwary away. The surviving inhabitants of the system, those few who had not been killed or corrupted, were transported to neighboring systems. All records of the Blood Angel's presence on Cygnus were expunged from their archives to prevent the spread of knowledge about chaos corruption. As the Blood Angels departed Cygnus Prime, leaving behind a dead system as a monument to Horus's treachery, they received a message from Rogel Dawn. Terra was under threat. The War Master had declared his rebellion openly. Every loyal legion was called to return to the throne world to defend the Emperor. The Blood Angels set course for Terra, but the vast distances of space and the interference of the Ruin Storm, a massive warp storm created by the Word-Bearer's demonic rituals, meant the journey would take far longer than any of them hoped. Sanguinius had been wounded in ways that transcended physical injury. His sons had been shown the darkness within their own souls. The Cygnus campaign had been a strategic failure for Horus. The Blood Angels had not been corrupted or destroyed, but it had inflicted psychological damage that would echo through the millennia. The seeds had been planted for something even worse than the Red Thirst, something that would only manifest after one final, terrible betrayal. The Siege of Terra and the Angel's Sacrifice. The journey from Cygnus to Terra was long and fraught with danger. The Ruin Storm, a massive warp phenomenon that split the galaxy and made navigation nearly impossible, stood between the Blood Angels and their homeworld. Sanguinius eventually found his way to Macraga, the homeworld of the Ultramarines, where he was reunited with Rabute Gilliman and Lion L. Johnson of the Dark Angels. Gilliman, fearing that Terra had already fallen to Horus, proposed a desperate plan: the creation of Imperium Secundus, a contingency empire based in Ultramar that could preserve humanity even if the Emperor and Terra were lost. Reluctantly, Sanguinius agreed to be crowned as the Emperor Regent of this new Imperium, though he did so with great misgiving. The honor of replacing his father, even temporarily, weighed heavily upon him. But Sanguinius could not escape his visions. The Primarch's foresight, which had once been a useful tool in battle, now became a curse. He saw his death clearly and repeatedly. He knew that when he finally reached Terra, when he confronted Horus aboard the War Master's flagship, he would die. The visions showed him his end in terrible detail. Horus, corrupted beyond recognition by the Chaos Gods, standing over Sanguinius's broken body, the angel's blood pooling on the deck of the vengeful spirit. Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, confronted Sanguinius during his time in Imperium Secundus. Kurz, who also possessed the gift of foresight, had seen his own death and had been driven to madness by the futility of trying to change fate. He wanted to know why Sanguinius still followed the Emperor when their mutual visions had proven that their father's teachings about the malleability of fate were lies. If futures were fixed, if death was inevitable, what was the point of continuing to fight? Sanguinius's answer was simple but profound. Even if he could not change his fate, even if he was destined to die at Horus's hands, the manner of his death mattered. He would face his end with dignity, with courage, fighting for something greater than himself. His sacrifice would have meaning because he chose to give it meaning. This was the difference between Kurzi and Sanguinius. One saw inevitable doom and succumbed to nihilism. The other saw inevitable doom and chose to face it with nobility. When the Ruin Storm finally cleared enough to allow travel to Terra, Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made all haste to reach their homeworld. They arrived during the later stages of the Siege of Terra. The massive conflict where traitor legions sought to break through the defenses of the imperial palace and reach the emperor himself. The Blood Angels threw themselves into the defense with desperate fervor, knowing that they were among the last loyalist reinforcements that would reach Terra before the siege reached its climax. Sanguinius led his sons in the defense of the Eternity Gate, the final barrier between the traitor forces and the Sanctum Imperialis, where the Emperor maintained the psychic shield that kept demons from flooding Terra. The Blood Angels fought for days without rest, holding the gate against impossible odds. Wave after wave of traitors, demons, and corrupted cultists broke against their position, and the Blood Angels held. During this defense, Jagatai Khan of the White Scars was grievously wounded in battle, poisoned by a warp-tainted blade while leading a desperate charge to buy time for Terra's defenders. The Khan's condition deteriorated rapidly, his life hanging by a thread. Sanguinius, defying Rogel Dawn's orders to maintain the defense of the palace, led his sanguinary guard out of the fortress in a sortie to rescue the Khan. The mission was successful, but it demonstrated the toll that the siege was taking on Sanguinius. He was exhausted, wounded in body and soul, his visions of his coming death growing more intense with each passing hour. But he could not stop fighting. As long as his father needed him, as long as Terra held out, Sanguinius would stand at the forefront of the defense. Kabanda returned during the siege, leading a demonic invasion that sought to claim the souls of 500 Blood Angels in Sanguinius's presence. This was the mission Khorne had assigned the Bloodthirster after its humiliating defeat on Cygnus Prime: prove its worth by claiming the souls of Sanguinius's sons before the Angels' very eyes. The demon tore through the defenders at the Eternity Gate, slaughtering Blood Angels with terrible efficiency, its rage fueled by millennia of hatred. Sanguinius confronted Kabanda once more, and once again the two winged figures clashed in the skies above the battlefield. But this time, Sanguinius was not at full strength. He was wounded, weary from weeks of constant combat, his psychic reserves depleted from maintaining his presence as an inspiration to the defenders. Kabanda, sensing this weakness, pressed its advantage with savage glee. The demon cast Sanguinius to the ground once more, just as it had on Cygnus Prime, but this time, something was different. Sanguinius, drawing upon reserves of strength that should not have existed, pulled himself to his feet. He grabbed Kabanda by the ankle and arm, just as he had before, and with one final surge of power, he hurled the Bloodthirster into the traitor horde. The massive demon crashed through ranks of traitor space marines and cultists, its body broken from the impact. As the last loyalists fell back through the Eternity Gate, as the great portal began to close, Kabanda could only watch in impotent fury as its prey escaped once more. The demon would have to wait another 10,000 years for its vengeance. With the Eternity Gate secured, the siege should have continued its grinding attrition. But then, something unexpected happened. Horus lowered the void shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. This was an open challenge, an invitation for the Emperor to come and face him in single combat. It was also potentially a trap, but the Emperor knew he could not refuse. The fate of humanity would be decided aboard that ship. The Emperor, Sanguinius, and Rogel Dawn teleported aboard the Vengeful Spirit with select companies of custodians, Imperial Fists, and Blood Angels. The plan was for the three of them to reach the bridge together, to confront Horus as a united force. But the War Master's chaos-fueled powers scattered them across the massive warship when they teleported through the warp. Each would have to fight their way to the bridge separately, battling through corridors that had been transformed into hellish mockeries of normal space. Sanguinius reached the bridge first. He found Horus waiting for him in a chamber called Lupercal's Court, a throne room that bore only faint resemblance to the place where Horus had once held council with his brothers. The corruption of chaos had transformed it into something that hurt to look upon. Angles that shouldn't exist. Shadows that moved independently of any light source. the very air thick with the stench of the warp. Horus stood at the center of this nightmare, and he was no longer the brother Sanguinius had known. The War Master had always been large, even for a Primarch, but now he had swollen to monstrous proportions. His armor, once the pristine white and green of the lunar wolves, was now corrupted black and brass, covered in spikes and chaos sigils. His eyes burned with unnatural fire. The Chaos Gods had claimed him completely, transforming him into their instrument of destruction. The two brothers spoke, one final conversation before the end. Horus offered Sanguinius a chance to join him in ascendancy, to share in the power that the Chaos Gods offered. Together, they could overthrow the Emperor and rule the galaxy. Sanguinius could have everything he had ever wanted: an end to the red thirst that plagued his sons, unlimited power, the freedom to shape the Imperium according to his vision of justice and nobility. Sanguinius refused. Even knowing that his death was moments away, even seeing the future where Horus would strike him down, the angel would not betray his father. He drew his weapons and attacked, determined to at least weaken Horus enough that when the Emperor finally arrived, there would be a chance of victory. The duel that followed was brief but terrible. Sanguinius fought with every bit of skill and fury he possessed. His blade struck Horus's armor, and in one crucial moment, he managed to pierce through to the flesh beneath, creating a small wound. Some accounts say this crack in Horus's armor would later prove crucial, giving the Emperor a weakness to exploit. Other accounts claim it was nothing, a futile gesture from a Primarch about to die. Horus, empowered by all four Chaos Gods, was simply too strong. He caught Sanguinius mid-flight with a psychic attack, reaching into the 8th dimension to grab the angel and slam him to the deck. The impact shattered bones and split armor. Before Sanguinius could recover, Horus battered him with Worldbreaker, the War Master's massive power maul. Each blow broke more of Sanguinius's body. Each strike pushed him closer to death. Finally, Horus wrapped his hands around Sanguinius's throat and strangled the life from his beloved brother. But Horus did not simply kill Sanguinius. He tortured the angel's soul in ways beyond mortal comprehension, using warp powers to inflict agony that transcended physical pain. He wanted Sanguinius to suffer, to know true despair, to feel the full weight of his failure in his final moments. The psychic scream of Sanguinius's death tore across the planet below and through the warp beyond. Every blood angel, from the oldest veteran to the newest initiate, felt their Primarch die. They experienced a fragment of his final agony, felt the betrayal and the fury and the sorrow that consumed Sanguinius in his last moments. The psychic connection between the Primarch and his sons, always strong, became a conduit for trauma that would scar the Blood Angel's gene seed forever. On Terra's surface, Blood Angels who were in the middle of combat suddenly went mad with grief and rage. They stormed off the walls of the Imperial Palace in a blind charge, attacking traitor positions with suicidal fervor. For a brief time, they nearly broke the siege through sheer berserk fury. But when the rage passed, when they came back to their senses and realized what had happened, the Blood Angels wept. The Emperor arrived at Lupercal's court to find Sanguinius's broken body at Horus's feet. The sight of his most beloved son, the one who had embodied hope and nobility, lying dead in a spreading pool of blood, shook the Emperor in ways that battles against the Chaos Gods never had. This was not just tactical loss, this was personal. Horus had not merely killed Sanguinius, he had murdered beauty itself, had extinguished light and grace from the galaxy. The Emperor's duel with Horus is chronicled elsewhere, in tales of how the Master of Mankind finally obliterated the War Master's soul, when a dying custodian or a brave Imperial army soldier, accounts vary, was killed for trying to aid the Emperor, breaking through the last fragments of Horus's humanity and allowing the Emperor to strike without mercy. But for the Blood Angels, what mattered was that their Primarch was dead, his sacrifice having bought time for the Emperor's victory. Rogel Dawn found the Emperor after the duel, Gravely wounded and on the verge of death, his psychic might spent in the battle with Horus, the Emperor's dying instructions led Dawn to carry him to the Golden Throne, the great device beneath the Imperial Palace that would sustain the master of mankind's psychic presence even as his physical body withered. But before leaving the vengeful spirit, Dawn took Sanguinius's body down from where it had been crucified, recovering the angel's remains to return to his sons. Sanguinius was laid to rest on Bel in the golden sarcophagus, a holy coffin placed deep within a vast tomb whose doors were topped with massive angel effigies. The blood angels brought their father home, and there he remains to this day, his body preserved perfectly, as beautiful in death as he had been in life. Pilgrims from across the galaxy come to pay their respects, and the blood angels themselves return to the tomb whenever they can, seeking guidance from their fallen father's memory. The Black Rage, the angel's curse, endures. The immediate aftermath of the Siege of Terra saw the blood angels in disarray. They had lost over 10,000 warriors during the defense of the palace and the battles across Terra. Their Primarch was dead. Their gene seed stores on Mars had been destroyed or corrupted during the fighting. To reconstitute the Legion, new gene seed had to be created from genetic samples removed directly from Sanguinius's body. This decision, made in desperation to save the Blood Angels from extinction, had unforeseen consequences. The gene seed extracted from Sanguinius after his death carried within it the psychic imprint of his final moments. Every warrior created from this gene seed would bear not just the physical legacy of Sanguinius, but also a fragment of his death trauma. The Black Rage had entered the Blood Angel's genetic legacy, a curse that would affect every son of Sanguinius from that day forward. At first, the manifestation was subtle. Blood Angels would occasionally report strange dreams or visions, seeing events from Sanguinius's life as if they were personal memories. Some claimed to dream of standing aboard the vengeful spirit, of seeing Horus's corrupted face, of feeling hands closing around their throat. The chaplains and apothecaries noted these incidents, but did not yet recognize them as symptoms of a deeper problem. The true horror of the Black Rage revealed itself during the Great Scouring, the campaigns to drive the traitor legions from Imperial space after the Siege of Terra. During a battle on a nameless world in the Eastern Fringe, several Blood Angels suddenly succumbed to what seemed like madness. They abandoned their tactical positions and threw themselves at the enemy with no regard for strategy or survival. They screamed oaths in voices that were not entirely their own, speaking of Horus and betrayal and the defense of Terra. When the battle ended, the affected Blood Angels could not be returned to sanity. They believed they were Sanguinius, believed they were aboard the vengeful spirit, believed they were living and dying in those final moments over and over again. They could not recognize their battle brothers. They attacked anyone who came close, seeing only traitors and demons. The only mercy that could be offered was a quick death. And even that was difficult. Those in the grip of the Black Rage displayed strength and resilience beyond what a normal Blood Angel possessed. Over the following centuries, the Blood Angels came to understand the full scope of their curse. The Black Rage could strike any of them at any time. The trigger was usually stress, combat, the eve of a major battle, situations that reminded the genetic memory of Sanguinius's last stand. When it struck, the afflicted Blood Angel's mind was drawn into the past, living through Sanguinius's final hours as if they were his own memories. The victim of the Black Rage becomes unable to distinguish past from present. He believes he is Sanguinius himself, preparing for the final confrontation with Horus. Everyone around him appears as either traitors or demons. His strength increases dramatically, drawing upon some echo of Primarch power encoded in his gene seed. His endurance becomes terrifying. Blood Angels in the grip of the Black Rage have been known to fight on with mortal wounds that would kill a normal space marine instantly. But the curse does not stop at individual warriors. As the millennia passed, the frequency of the Black Rage increased. where once it might strike 1 or 2 blood angels per century, it began affecting dozens, then hundreds. With each generation, with each passing decade, more sons of Sanguinius fell to the curse. The blood angels realized that they were fighting a losing battle against their own genetics, that eventually the Black Rage might claim them all. The chapter's response to this curse was the creation of the Death Company. Rather than execute their fallen brothers or lock them away to live out their days in madness, the Blood Angels found a way to give those afflicted by the Black Rage one final moment of purpose. When a Blood Angel succumbs to the curse on the eve of battle, he is inducted into the Death Company, marked with black armor and red crosses to symbolize the wounds of Sanguinius. The Death Company is led by chaplains, those warriors who maintain enough presence of mind when near the afflicted to command them without being caught up in their madness. These chaplains wear skull-faced helms and speak in litanies and oaths that can sometimes penetrate the fog of the Black Rage, directing the afflicted toward the enemy rather than allowing them to attack indiscriminately. In battle, the Death Company is unleashed at the most dangerous points, sent to accomplish missions that would be suicidal for normal forces. They fight with a fury that terrifies even veteran enemies, throwing themselves at defensive positions with no thought of survival, tearing through enemy ranks with strength that seems impossible even for Space Marines. The hope is that they will die quickly and honorably in combat, that their end will serve the chapter and the Emperor, rather than simply being a waste of a warrior's life. But sometimes, the Death Company survives the battle. Sometimes those in the grip of the Black Rage manage to live through engagements that should have killed them multiple times over. When this happens, they are returned to the Tower of Amareo, also called the Tower of the Lost, on Baal. This fortress within the Blood Angels monastery complex is where those claimed by the Black Rage are kept when they cannot be given the release of honorable death. The Tower of Amareo is a place of great sorrow. Within its walls are chambers where Blood Angels relive Sanguinius's death endlessly, their minds trapped in a cycle of trauma they cannot escape. Some rage against invisible enemies, fighting battles that ended 10,000 years ago. Others weep for their lost father, mourning a death they believe just occurred. The sanguinary priests attend to them, trying to ease their suffering, but there is no cure, no redemption, only the slow decline into complete madness. A very few have ever broken free from the Black Rage. Chief Librarian Mephiston, the Lord of Death, managed to overcome the curse through an act of will that should have been impossible. During the First Tyrannic War, when Mephiston was still known as Brother Calistarius, he was buried alive beneath rubble and succumbed to the Black Rage. For 7 days and 7 nights, he was trapped in darkness, living through Sanguinius's death again and again. But somehow, through strength of will, or perhaps through some gift of his psychic power, he clawed his way out of the Black Rage and back to consciousness. When he emerged from the rubble, he was changed. He was no longer Brother Calistarius, but Mephiston, reborn. His psychic powers vastly increased, his connection to the Black Rage severed in ways that no one, including himself, fully understands. But even Mephiston carries scars from the experience. And he knows that his freedom from the curse might be temporary, that the Black Rage could still claim him one day. The Red Thirst and the Black Rage together form what the Blood Angels call the Flaw, the twin curses that define their existence. Every Blood Angel lives with the knowledge that he might fall to one or both of these afflictions. Every time they prepare for battle, they wonder if this will be the day the Red Thirst becomes too strong to resist, if this will be the moment when the Black Rage drags them into Sanguinius's death vision. This knowledge makes the Blood Angels both more noble and more desperate than other chapters. They know their time is limited. They know that the Flaw will eventually claim them all unless they die honorably in battle first. So they strive to make every moment count, to create beauty in a galaxy of horror, to stand as exemplars of everything a Space Marine should be for however long they have left. They are artists and warriors, poets and killers, angels and monsters. They are the Blood Angels, and they carry their Primarch's curse with as much dignity as they can muster, knowing that their struggle against their own nature is as important as any battle against the Imperium's external enemies. The Long Vigil, 10,000 years of war. The millennia following the Horus heresy saw the Blood Angels chapter, now reduced from a legion to approximately 1,000 warriors, as mandated by Robert Guilliman's Codex Astartes, fighting on countless battlefields across the Imperium. They earned honors and accolades, their battle standards growing heavy with campaign ribbons and victory laurels. But they also suffered under the weight of their curse, losing more brothers to the floor with each passing century. The chapter's homeworld of Baal and its moons remained as harsh as ever. New recruits were drawn from the tribes that still eked out existence on the radiation-soaked surfaces of Baal Secundus and Baal Prime. These aspirants had to survive journeys across deadly wastelands just to reach the Blood Angels' fortress monastery, the Arx Angelicum. The pilgrimage itself was a trial that killed more than half of those who attempted it. Radiation storms could appear without warning, frying aspirants in their tracks. Mutant predators hunted the young warriors. Rival tribes attacked travelers on sight. Those who made it to the gates of the Arx Angelicum had already proven themselves worthy of consideration. The trials did not end at the gates. The Blood Angels tested their aspirants rigorously, pushing them to their physical and mental limits. They sought warriors who possessed not just strength and endurance, but also intelligence, creativity, and nobility of spirit. The transformation into a space marine was particularly agonizing for Blood Angels recruits, the process of implanting Sanguinius's gene seed more painful than it was for other chapters. Many died during the transformation. Those who survived underwent the insanguination, a ritual where they were exposed to genetic material derived from Sanguinius himself, deepening their connection to their Primarch and the chapter's traditions. Once fully transformed, a Blood Angel would serve in one of the chapter's 10 companies, each numbering approximately 100 warriors. The companies maintained specialized roles while also remaining flexible enough to adapt to different combat situations. The first company, the Archangels, consisted entirely of veterans who had proven themselves across decades or even centuries of warfare. They had access to Terminator armor and the chapter's most sacred weapons. The 2nd through 5th companies were battle companies, capable of deploying independently for extended campaigns. The 6th through 9th companies were reserve and training formations. The 10th company consisted of scouts, young Blood Angels learning the arts of reconnaissance and stealth warfare before they earned the right to wear full power armor. Those who survived underwent the transformation into Space Marines, receiving the gene seed of Sanguinius, and with it, the potential for the Red Thirst and Black Rage. The knowledge that they carried this curse within them from the moment of their transformation shaped every Blood Angel's existence. They knew that they might, at any moment, fall to forces beyond their control. This knowledge bred both humility and determination. Commander Dante, the current chapter master of the Blood Angels, is the oldest non-dreadnought space marine in the Imperium, having served for over 1,500 years. His longevity is remarkable even by Blood Angel standards, and some whisper that the flaw paradoxically extends the lifespan of those it afflicts, as if the curse wants to prolong its victim's suffering. Dante has led the Blood Angels through countless campaigns, has made impossible decisions, has watched generation after generation of his brothers fall to the floor or die in battle. Dante is weary in ways that go beyond physical exhaustion. He has prophetic dreams, as many Blood Angels do, and in these dreams, he sees himself standing at the Emperor's side during the galaxy's final battle. For years, he believed this meant he would die in service, that his place would be at the Emperor's side in death. But fate had other plans for Dante, plans that would unfold in the closing years of the 41st millennium. The Blood Angels maintained their traditions across the millennia. They continued to pursue artistic endeavors between battles, creating works of sculpture and painting that rivaled the greatest achievements of human culture. They held to the rituals established by Sanguinius, the ceremonies involving the sanguinary priests and their vials of blood, the remembrances of their primarch's sacrifice. They trained with ferocity, knowing that any weakness might allow the flaw to take hold. The sanguinary priesthood became one of the most important institutions within the chapter. These warrior mystics served as both spiritual leaders and genetic specialists, monitoring the gene seed for signs of corruption, performing the rites that helped keep the red thirst in check, tending to those who fell to the black rage. Each sanguinary priest carried the exsanguinator, a device that could extract gene seed from fallen brothers, and also administer the blood rituals that connected the blood angels to their primarch. The chapter also maintained the Sanguinary Guard, an elite formation that traced its origins to Sanguinius's personal bodyguard during the Great Crusade. These warriors wore golden armor and wielded the finest weapons the chapter possessed. They were chosen from the most skilled and experienced blood angels, and they fought with a grace and deadliness that made them legends across the Imperium. The Sanguinary Guard had accompanied Sanguinius aboard the Vengeful Spirit, and they had witnessed their father's final moments, a memory that was burned into the chapter's collective consciousness. Throughout these 10 millennia, the Blood Angels fought against every threat that beset the Imperium. They battled orc hordes that threatened to overrun entire sectors. They stood against chaos incursions that sought to corrupt human worlds. They faced Eldar raiders and Dark Eldar slavers, Necron dynasties awakening from millions of years of slumber, and the first tendrils of the Tyrannid hive fleets entering the galaxy. The Blood Angels earned particular renown for their actions during the Third War for Armageddon, fighting alongside their successor chapters against an orc invasion of staggering proportions. They defended Imperial worlds during the Age of Apostasy, standing against the madness that gripped the ecclesiarchy during that dark time. They fought in the Gothic War, battling chaos fleets in void combats that lasted for decades. But the curse continued to take its toll. Each generation saw more Blood Angels fall to the floor. The Death Company grew larger with each passing century. The Tower of Amareo filled with those lost to the Black Rage. The chapter found itself in a slow decline, a death by degrees that no amount of heroism could prevent. The Sanguinary Brotherhood, heirs to the floor. The Blood Angels were not alone in bearing their curse. During the second founding, when the Loyalist legions were broken into 1,000 Marine chapters, the Blood Angels spawned several successor chapters from their gene seed. The Flesh Tearers, Angels in Carmine, Angels Sanguine, Blood Drinkers, and Angels Vermilion all traced their lineage to Sanguinius. In later foundings, more chapters were created, though the instability of the Blood Angels gene seed meant that fewer successors were established compared to more stable bloodlines like the Ultramarines. All of these successor chapters inherited the flaw. They all suffered from the Red Thirst and the Black Rage to varying degrees. Some managed the curses better than others. Some fell to them more readily, becoming savage and brutal, where the Blood Angels themselves maintained a veneer of nobility. But all of them were bound by their common heritage, all of them sons of the angel, all of them cursed and blessed in equal measure. The Flesh Tearers represent the Blood Angels at their most brutal. Chapter Master Gabriel Seth leads a chapter that has long struggled with an unusually severe manifestation of the flaw. The Flesh Tearers fall to the Red Thirst more frequently than their parent chapter, and their methods in battle are savage even by Space Marine standards. They have been known to massacre Imperial civilians caught in crossfire, to turn on Allied forces when the Red Thirst takes hold, to fight with a ferocity that borders on the bestial. Gabriel Seth is a warrior of great honor who hates what his chapter has become. He works tirelessly to restore the Flesh Tearers' reputation, to prove that they can fight with discipline and tactics rather than only savage fury. but the chapter's numbers are declining, their gene seed increasingly unstable, and Seth knows that the flesh-tearers may be doomed to extinction within a few more generations. The arrival of Primaris Marines has offered some hope, but even these new warriors are not immune to the flaw. The Blood Drinkers take a different approach to their curse. They have made a pact with a demon, a dangerous and heretical act that could see them declared excommunicate traitorous if it were widely known. In exchange for a blood-drinking rite that helps control the red thirst and delay the onset of the black rage, the Blood Drinkers have granted the demon Kairos the ability to speak to certain Death Company Marines, tempting them with offers of chaos corruption. So far, all who have been tempted have refused, but the chapter knows that a single acceptance would damn them all. The Lamenters are perhaps the most tragic of the successor chapters. Through some quirk of their founding or their gene seed stock, they initially seem to have escaped the worst effects of the flaw. The red thirst and black rage were present but muted, allowing the Lamenters to fight with relative stability. But what they gained in genetic purity, they paid for with catastrophically bad luck. The Lamenters have suffered disaster after disaster across their history. They were caught in warp storms and declared lost multiple times, only to emerge centuries later with their numbers devastated. They fought on the wrong side of the Badab War, manipulated by the secessionist Astral Clause, and later judged complicit in that rebellion. They were nearly annihilated by Hive Fleet Kraken during the First Tyrannic War, suffering 95% casualties. At one point, the chapter had been reduced to just 300 warriors, fighting a penitent crusade that seemed designed to ensure their complete destruction. The Angels in Carmine are among the most active successor chapters, their chapter master, unable to rest and forever seeking new campaigns. They maintain strong ties to the Blood Angels while developing their own traditions and combat doctrines. The Angels Sanguine have embraced the Gothic aesthetic of their curse, painting their armor black and red, leaning into the vampire imagery that their gene seed suggests. These successor chapters, along with dozens of others, form what is called the Sanguinary Brotherhood. When threats arise that require more than a single chapter can provide, the Sons of Sanguinius answer the call. They gather together, setting aside individual chapter identities to fight as a unified force, much as they had when they were a legion. The Brotherhood has answered such calls multiple times across Imperial history, most recently during the events that would come to be known as the Devastation of Baal. The Devastation of Baal, the chapter's darkest hour. In the closing years of the 41st Millennium, as the galaxy teetered on the brink of an apocalypse that would reshape reality itself, the Blood Angels faced their greatest threat since the Siege of Terra. Hive Fleet Leviathan, one of the massive Tyrannid invasion forces that had entered the galaxy from the intergalactic void, changed course. Rather than continuing its advance through more populated regions of space, the Hive Fleet turned toward the Red Scar, the region of space where Baal resided. The Hive Mind, the terrible intelligence that controlled all Tyrannids, had made a deliberate choice. It had identified the Blood Angels as a significant threat, a chapter whose tactical acumen and combat effectiveness had repeatedly thwarted Tyrannid advances. If the Blood Angels could be destroyed, if their gene seed stocks could be consumed, if their homeworld could be devoured, the Imperium would be significantly weakened. The Tyrannids were not just seeking biomass, they were seeking strategic advantage. Commander Dante recognized the threat for what it was and issued a call to all successor chapters of the Blood Angels. He asked them to come to Baal to defend the homeworld of their Primarch against the Xenos Tide. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of chapters answered the call, some sending a few squads, others coming in force with most of their chapter strength. Even the Knights of Blood, a chapter that had been declared excommunicate traitorous for excessive brutality, came to fight alongside their brothers. Nearly 30,000 Space Marines gathered on Baal and its moons, the largest concentration of Blood Angels gene seed since the Horus Heresy. They fortified every defensible position, recommissioned ancient weapons from the heresy era, prepared every able-bodied warrior and even the newest aspirants for the coming battle. Dante knew it would not be enough. The Tyrannid fleet approaching Baal numbered in the hundreds of thousands of bioships, a force so vast that it blotted out the stars. The Blood Angels fought a delaying campaign, striking at splinter fleets before they could reach Baal, denying the Tyrannids resources by declaring exterminatus on Imperial worlds in Leviathan's path. It was a brutal strategy, sacrificing human lives by the billions to starve the hive fleet. Entire systems were left as dead zones, their populations scoured from existence to deny the Tyrannids the biomass they needed to grow stronger. But still they came. The shadow in the warp, the psychic disturbance that Tyrannids generated, descended over Baal like a suffocating blanket. Astropathic communication became impossible. The Blood Angels were cut off from the wider Imperium, alone in the darkness, waiting for a foe that numbered in the trillions. When the invasion began, it was overwhelming. The Tyrannid bioships tore through the orbital defenses, overwhelming the Blood Angels' fleet through sheer numbers. Ships were isolated and destroyed one by one, their hulls ripped apart by organic projectiles and boarding parties of Genostealers and gargoyles. The surviving Space Marines retreated to the surface of Baal and its moons, preparing for the ground assault they knew was coming. On Baal itself, the Blood Angels fortified the Arx Angelicum, their fortress monastery. Void shields protected the structure from orbital bombardment. Ancient defense systems, some dating back to the dark age of technology, were activated. Every weapon that could be brought to bear was positioned to cover the approaches. The Blood Angels dug in and waited. The first 19 waves of Tyrannids were driven back, but at terrible cost. 5 chapter masters fell in battle during the defense. On Baal Secundus, Gabriel Seth and the Flesh Tearers held training facilities, while other chapters defended key positions. The Swarmlord itself, the most dangerous Tyrannid creature ever encountered by humanity, led the assault on Baal Secundus, and its tactical genius began to turn the tide against the defenders. Dante fought the Swarmlord in single combat and managed to slay the creature, but was gravely wounded in the process. As he lay dying, Dante had a vision. He saw Sanguinius, his Primarch, standing before him in glory. The angel spoke words of comfort and pride, calling Dante his greatest son. Dante begged to be allowed to die, to finally rest after 15 centuries of service, but Sanguinius told him his duty was not yet ended. With a touch, the Primarch healed Dante and sent him back to the battle. When Dante awoke, his wounds had been healed by some miracle. He rose to continue the fight, but the situation on Baal continued to deteriorate. The Tyrannids had broken through the void shields of the Arx Angelicum. They poured into the fortress monastery itself, fighting through corridors and chambers that had stood for 10,000 years. The Blood Angels were being overwhelmed, their numbers dwindling, death coming for them all. And then something unexpected happened. The Great Rift, a massive warp storm that would split the galaxy in two, erupted as Cardia fell far across the galaxy. The psychic backlash disrupted the hive mind's control over the Tyrannid swarms on Baal. At the same moment, a massive demonic incursion occurred on Baal Prime, led by Kabanda, seeking its eternal vengeance against the Blood Angels. The Bloodthirster had no interest in saving the Blood Angels, but it was even more interested in killing Tyrannids. Kabanda and its demonic horde tore into the Tyrannid forces on Baal Prime with terrible fury, the two alien threats annihilating each other in a three-way battle that also killed thousands of Space Marines. When the demons were finally banished back to the warp, they left behind mountains of Tyrannid skulls arranged in the 8-pointed star of chaos, Kabanda's calling card, and a promise that it would return. With the hive mind disrupted and the Tyrannid forces in disarray, the Blood Angels managed to hold on just long enough for salvation to arrive. The Indomitus Crusade, led by the resurrected Primarch Robut Guilliman, emerged from the warp at Baal, Guilliman's fleet, which included thousands of newly created Primaris Space Marines, fell upon the scattered Tyranid forces and destroyed them. The devastation of Baal was over. The Blood Angels had survived, but at terrible cost. Baal and its moons were left devastated, their populations nearly extinct, their landscapes scarred by warfare. The chapters' numbers had been reduced to a fraction of their strength. Entire successor chapters had been destroyed or reduced to handfuls of survivors. Guilliman, seeing the noble spirit that had kept the Blood Angels fighting against impossible odds, granted them a gift: formations of Primaris Space Marines created from Sanguinius's gene seed. These new warriors, taller and stronger than their predecessors, brought with them hope for the chapter's future. The Blood Angels could rebuild, could replenish their losses, could continue to serve the Imperium. But the Primaris Marines also brought questions. Did they carry the flaw? Could they fall to the red thirst and black rage? The early years would prove that, yes, even these enhanced warriors were not immune to the curse of Sanguinius. The flaw remained, as eternal and inescapable as ever. Guilliman also named Dante as regent of Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the galaxy on the far side of the Great Rift. This was both an honor and a burden, placing Dante in command of all Imperial forces in a region cut off from Terra's light. The old chapter master had wanted to die, to finally rest, but instead, he was given even greater responsibilities, asked to serve for longer still. The Blood Angels. Today, angels in darkness. In the current era, with the galaxy split by the Great Rift and the Imperium beset on all sides by enemies, the Blood Angels stand as one of the most respected and feared chapters of Space Marines. They have been rebuilt with Primaris reinforcements, their numbers restored after the devastating losses at Baal. But they face challenges that previous generations never imagined. The Great Rift has made travel and communication incredibly difficult. Entire sectors have been cut off from Imperial authority. Demon incursions occur with terrifying frequency. The Tyranid threat remains, with portions of Hive fleet Leviathans still lurking in the Baal system, cut off from the hive mind, but still dangerous. Chaos warbands raid Imperial worlds with impunity. Xenos races grow bolder, sensing weakness in the Imperium's fractured state. Through all of this, the Blood Angels continue their eternal vigil. They fight on battlefields across the Imperium Nihilus and beyond, their red and gold armor a symbol of hope to Imperial citizens and terror to the Emperor's enemies. They maintain their artistic traditions, creating beauty in the midst of horror. They train new recruits from the tribes of Baal, passing on their legacy to another generation of warriors who will bear both the glory and the curse of Sanguinius's bloodline. Chief Librarian Mephiston underwent the Rubicon Primaris, the dangerous procedure that transforms a firstborn Space Marine into a Primaris warrior. He became the first Blood Angels veteran to successfully make the transition, serving as an example to others. The experience brought him once again to the edge of the Black Rage, and once again he survived through strength of will that defies understanding. The Death Company continues to grow with each battle, each deployment seeing more Blood Angels fall to the Black Rage. But now they fight with Primaris physiology and equipment, making them even more dangerous on the battlefield. The sight of Death Company intercessors or aggressors is enough to make enemy commanders reconsider their battle plans. The Blood Angel successor chapters fight alongside them, the Sanguinary Brotherhood united in common cause more than ever before. The devastation of Baal proved that when the sons of Sanguinius stand together, they can overcome nearly any threat. The bonds between chapters have strengthened, with warriors from different chapters serving together, sharing tactics and strategies, supporting each other in ways that go beyond mere military cooperation. But the flaw remains. The curse that Sanguinius passed to his sons through his death shows no signs of weakening. If anything, it grows stronger with each passing year, each passing generation. More Blood Angels fall to the red thirst in the heat of battle. More wake from their rest on the eve of combat to find themselves in the grip of the Black Rage. their minds lost to visions of a death that occurred 10,000 years ago. The Blood Angels know they are living on borrowed time. They know that eventually, the flaw will claim them all, that there may come a day when every Blood Angel stands in the Tower of Amareo, lost to madness, unable to serve. But until that day comes, they will continue to fight. They will continue to create beauty and pursue nobility. They will continue to stand as exemplars of what the Emperor's Space Marines should be. They are the Blood Angels, the sons of Sanguinius, heirs to glory and cursed by tragedy. They are artists and warriors, angels and monsters, the finest and most damned of all the Emperor's creations. Their story is far from over, and as long as a single Blood Angel draws breath, as long as a single warrior carries the gene seed of the angel, they will fight on. For the Emperor, for Sanguinius, for the blood of the martyred. They are the 9th Legion, and they will endure. Conclusion. The history of the Blood Angels is a story of contradictions, beauty and horror, nobility and savagery, hope and despair bound together in a single gene line. From their origins as the reviled eaters of the dead to their transformation under Sanguinius into paragons of knightly virtue, from the tragedy of the heresy to their desperate stand at Baal, the Blood Angels have endured trials that would have destroyed lesser chapters. Their curse, the twin afflictions of the Red Thirst and Black Rage, should have doomed them millennia ago. But instead, it has made them stronger in ways that defy easy explanation. The knowledge that they carry darkness within themselves has made them more careful, more controlled, more dedicated to being better than their nature demands. Every Blood Angel who resists the flaw, who fights through another battle without falling to madness, proves that will and discipline can triumph over even genetic destiny. Sanguinius's sacrifice on the vengeful spirit was not in vain. His death weakened Horus enough for the Emperor to strike the killing blow, saving humanity from a future of eternal darkness under Chaos rule. But the cost of that sacrifice echoes through every Blood Angel who has lived since, a burden that they bear with all the grace they can muster. The Blood Angels endure because they must. They are needed. In a galaxy where darkness presses in from all sides, where humanity struggles for survival against impossible odds, the Blood Angels stand as proof that beauty and nobility can exist even in the grim darkness of the far future. They show that monsters can choose to be heroes, that curse can be transformed into purpose, that even those doomed to fall can stand tall until that final moment arrives. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the complete history of the Blood Angels, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Stories of Hammer for more comprehensive lore explorations of the Warhammer 40K universe. We cover everything from the smallest chapters to the mightiest Primarchs, bringing you the stories that make this setting so compelling. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload, and let us know in the comments which chapter or faction you'd like us to cover next. For Sanguinius, for the Emperor, for the Angel.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.